everybody, Ladies Jim here. In this video we're going to learn how to make this very cool potpourri box. We're at the Kinetic Cutter Club Project 8, and so we're going to learn a lot of exciting things in this project. We're going to learn about star gears, or five-sided elliptical gears if you want to be precise. And we're going to learn a little bit about making these really cool multi-sided boxes, and I'm going to introduce you to one of my favorite tools that we can use to do that. Okay, let's now take a look at the pieces of the potpourri box and talk about how we've designed it and what things are in this that we're going to be looking at and using. As always, we have given you this wonderful set of drawings in Corel format, in DXF format, in SVG format, and in PDF. And I'm trusting that you've selected the right one of those for your software and your tools to use. We've also given them to you both in inch and millimeter format. And so you can go do whatever you want to do with opening the correct file. I'm going to look at them in Corel. So here we have Corel Draw. And if you look in Corel, you'll notice that we've got, as usual, our little legend here tells you how many screws and nuts you need. In addition, it's got our cutting order. And you'll see we've got lots of different layers of inner cuts. The reason we've done that is we've actually stacked parts on top of each other. And so you want to make sure you get the parts you need in the right order, and that's why we've done this nested cutting order. It makes a huge difference if your wood has any warp in it at all, and you'll see quite a lot of that in some pieces of wood. So now we're going to take a look at the project itself. I'm going to start, as I usually do, by getting rid of these outer sizes. Make sure your box size matches the inch dimensions you want. So this is an 11 by 18 box, and that's what my measurements say here. So I'm going to do all of that. And to get it ready for cutting, all I want to do then is select all of the pieces. And on my laser, that alignment spot is to the lower left-hand side of the page, so I'm going to move them here. Now, how did we get to this design is the question you might ask. We used some gear design software to design the gears that are going to go on the top, and you'll see that these 3 gears go in this hole right here. And then I've designed these stars to go in it to make it look more like stars. One of the things you can customize is you can certainly take these gears and customize what this center spoke pattern looks like to be anything you want it to be, really. You've got a lot of flexibility in that piece of the design. And that's just the lid itself. The other thing I did with the lid of this box was I took that outer shape and I made a copy of it, and I made it just a little bit smaller. So it's 1/8 of an inch smaller all the way around, and that gives me this lip that we'll use when we set the lid on the box. If you want your lip to be 1/4 of an inch thick, then cut an extra one of these interior shapes, and that'll give you an extra lip to use for your box. So let's talk about box design for a second. That's sort of the next piece to look at. And what I did for box design is I used a really neat website called boxes.pi. The URL is festi.info/boxes.pi. It's one of my favorite box designers online. And one of the things they'll do is they'll build a lot of different boxes. And you'll notice as you go through these that you get sampled pictures of some of them. They have ones with hinges, all kinds of different things. The one we used in this case is the angled box. And what you'll do here is set up several different things you want to use. You're going to decide, and by the way, this is millimeters. For those of you outside the US, that will be easy. For those of us in the US, it means you have to think a little bit. But what you're going to decide is your inner dimensions and your inner height, and then the number of walls you want on a side. So if you want a 6-sided box, you type number 5 here. If you want an 8-sided box, then you type the number 7 here. And then I made sure I specified that I did want a box top when I designed this. So what I got back from the design from Festy Boxes is a box that had the top and the bottom, which was just this and this, plus my 8 side panels here. And I really didn't have to do a lot to the designs to make them work together. We've already talked about adding these slotted tabs to put screw together panels and boxes, and you can see that we've got those screws in coming up from the bottom and the holes for them on the sides. Now I did it that way rather than putting the holes going into the bottom, because I wanted to make sure that if I put feet on the bottom, I had lots of clearance and I wasn't going to scratch a table with the side of a nut. Be a little careful when you build these to think about those kinds of details. So this design is using the screws going up from the bottom into the sides of the box. If you're worried about what the side looks like, you could swap those around, but then you've got to be careful with how you mount them. The other thing we did, obviously, was build lots of stars. Corel has a really nice star building function in it, and you can build stars to whatever size and shape you want, and you can cut out millions of stars. By the way, the little confetti of cutting all of these stars out is something that's a lot of fun. So if you're going to end up needing decorations for Christmas or some other holiday, you might want to save the stars, because you can then decorate them with glitter or dye them or whatever you might want to do and give yourself some really fun shape cutouts to use. By the way, that is kind of a reminder that the scrap out of these laser products is one of the best things ever. And don't just get rid of your scrap. If you can help it, find somebody, a school or kids that really are interested in it. And then the other thing I did was made sure I had a nice angled hole, but I still had plenty of support on the lid when we put that in to not be a problem with the being too fragile. It's really important as you design to give yourself plenty of support. These are 0.1 inches. I would probably recommend, actually 0.18. I would probably recommend not going narrower than 0.1 in almost any project, or you're going to have wood that's way too wussy and it's going to fall apart on you. So I've got my project all ready to cut. Again, notice that I've got blue etching lines here. I've got red cutting lines and a green outline from that. And then we added this 2 more colors because we nested the star gears inside this lid frame. So I've got 2 additional colors, and I'd want to cut this light blue last and this magenta just before that in order to make sure that I didn't have a problem with warp in my wood at all. And that's what you need to do. Once you've done that, as always, you can now save this in whatever format you need to save it on your laser, and then go ahead and cut it. Now, we've given you one basic box. With this basic box, you have so many options. If you don't want to go design a new one, you don't have to, but you can completely transform this box by changing the patterns on the side or changing what the top looks like, not using the top lid at all and just making it a hole into an empty box. Really, the variations on this particular design are only as limited as your imagination. So I do want you to enjoy this and go ahead and cut it. And as always, make sure you send us pictures or join us on Slack and ask us questions if you have any questions about your projects. Now that you've cut your pieces, let's talk about what you need to do to prepare them to build and actually how to assemble this box. You should have your 3 star gears. You'll need 11 3/8-inch screws and nuts and a set of feet to finish it. And then your box is also going to have its base that the sides will connect into. And these sides are what I like to call innies. There should be 4 of them that are in like that and 4 outies. So you should have 4 of each. And then you'll also have the box top as well as a ring and the lid for the box. So when we do this assembly, I'm going to start with assembling the box itself. You'll want to make sure that you sand on this lid and at least on the back of the star gears when you're putting it together. The rest of it, how much you sand and how much you finish, as always, is completely up to you. So let's work on assembly here. And the way these go together, I'm going to start just with one side and put one in here. Now, in a perfect world, and as you build them, you are definitely going to want to make sure that you glue them together. I'm going to start, and in this demo, I'm actually going to just use screws to hold them together, but you'll want to glue each piece as you do it as well. But while I build these walls, I'm just going to screw them together. So that's a innie, so those sides are in. So I'm going to grab one of the ones that have longer tabs on it and put it on next. And make sure that I can get those 2 to slide together nicely. And that to slide into its hole nicely. And once I've done that, I can then put in the next screw. And you'll continue to do that all the way around the box. Getting the last couple of pieces in will be the challenge. But I have no doubt that you are up to it and you can get those to go in properly. I've got such good pressure fit right now. I'm going to do this first and then I'm going to come back in and put my screws in just to make sure I can get it all the way nice and tight all the way around. As I mentioned in the other video, the nice thing about this box maker is you can do any shape and size you want almost, and add multiple choices to your assembly. Okay, making sure those all get nice and tightly fit into the holes. That guy's not seated completely yet. And then comes the challenging one. So I'm going to do it vertically. Make sure it's the right direction. And now my box is together, and I'm just going to go through quickly and put the rest of my screws in. And again, you definitely will want to glue your box together. The screws will really help with sturdiness, but obviously glue is the right way to do it. We do most of our assembly with super glue, but you can use wood glue if you want to. If you use wood glue, make sure you put it together and clamp it well as you go. let it sit and dry before you continue on to the next stage. Whoops. That's why you use glue. And that's why we're going to glue on the top as soon as we get done with putting the sides together. And it looks like one more. And we've built the hardest part of that box now, which is getting the base in place. Now that the base is done, I'm ready to put my top on. And I'm definitely going to want to glue this in. So what I'm going to do is put my line of glue on the top, right out here, all the way around. Now, if you were having trouble getting the sides on, the other option is to use the lid and put two opposite sides together first, and then you can put each side on and attach it to the lid as you go. But you'll see here when I set this down that now is really the tricky part of getting this top aligned properly to those same sides. So I gotta get it close enough I can do this. Push that one down in and then just go around the box and slowly snap them into place. And make sure that I don't lose any of the screws on the bottom in the process of doing that. Once you've gone all the way around, I'd flip it over and push down, make sure that it really is all glued into place nicely. You can also put a bead of glue all the way around the inside if you need to, and then use Instaset or baking soda to make sure that that is nice and stable. And since I'm finishing my box up here, I'm going to put my feet on at this point. When we designed this for the box of making, we made it as a potpourri box. So it's got all these holes on the side. And it's designed to put potpourri in. But you can put almost anything in this box that you want. And it's just really a fun project to do. Now that my box part is done, I'm going to move over to the lid. And working on the lid, I've got two sections. I'm going to put my gears on the lid, and I'm also going to glue this ring around it. So I'm going to start with gluing the ring on. Obviously, either order is fine. And this is going to make sure your lid will sit nicely and snugly on the box. When you cut it, if you want the lid fit to be snugger, you can cut a second ring. We think one is deep enough, but if you want it to fit on tighter, you can certainly add another one to it. It's all about getting it lined up properly and don't squeeze it too much. If you think an 1/8 of an inch ring is too small, you can always make the lid bigger as well and then make your rings bigger to match them. And when I'm doing this kind of gluing, I always use a blue paper towel to wipe it all up when I'm done. I'm going to flip that over. And now I'm going to go ahead and put my gears on top. So I'm going to take my first one of these gears and I'm going to put it in the middle position. And the way we did these, they need to be screwed in. And that spins nicely. To align another one, what you're going to do is take the point of one gear into the middle of the indent on a second gear. And then I'm going to screw this one in just to make sure it's right and test it. The reason I made these small holes small is to make sure that you had a way to test your alignment before you glued the nuts on. And that gives you an easy way to do that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the third one and line it up here. The reason I picked that centered gear to start with is because, as you know, gears turn in opposite directions when you spin them. So with 3 gears, they can't all 3 touch each other. And I'm lined up perfectly. So I'm going to spin these all 3 down. So I got just a little bit of room to play in it. And I will flip them over. Put a little drop of glue on those nuts. If you have Loctite thread locker, that's better than using super glue. But super glue works just fine. And using a good screwdriver and a nut driver or a pair of pliers, you can take them off if you have to. Really, the reason for a thread locker would be if you thought you were going to need to remove them. So I'll put that back on top of my box. And now I have a perfectly built box. Do go ahead and send us pictures once you've finished with your projects. We think you're going to end up with some really fun customizations of the designs we've given you to start with.